Should comics run forever like Batman and Spider-Man, constantly evolving, never truly ending? Or is there more weight and power and value in telling a story like Invincible or Preacher, one that has a beginning, a middle, and an end?
Heads up. This podcast features strong language, adult themes, and the occasional colorful metaphor. Listener discretion is advised. As for the views, they're all ours. The smart ones, the spicy ones, and the occasional madness. Skylarking Media Inc. and its affiliates reserve the right to deny all involvement.
Hey guys, we are back with our 5th episode for Outsiders Comic Podcast. Yay! I am one of your hosts, Wade, currently on vacation, Aline. And we are here again to talk about comics, some more comics. Comics that came out last week, comics we liked. And we have a big discussion for you guys that you're going to enjoy. Guys, why don't you go around and introduce yourselves?
Hey, I'm Mark. And again, I am not giving myself a cool little code name this episode.
You're not going Corporal? No?
I mean, Corporal has such a bit of a backstory to it. So we'll let us
Yeah. And if you guys don't know what Corporal's about, ask in the comments. We'll tell you.
Or no.
This is Michael from Vista Verde. I had to move because a very irritated Rastamage attempted to turn me into well-cooked chicken for living in Bleecker Street, so I had to relocate promptly.
Hello, everyone. My name is Glenn, said Rastamage, and the original tenant of Bleecker Street. Here with my co-hosts and my night creatures in the background, my nocturnal orchestra.
They're not very noisy.
Look, they always hear when it's time to talk about comics, right? So, and do we have to talk about comics?
Yeah, welcome Glenn and the choir. All right, so we're going to move on now to our weekly reviews.
Yes, so we're going to talk about Mothra. Yes.
Yeah, you go ahead. You talk about, let me, so, I want to share some links. So I've seen what you guys have put forward, and I have lots of strong opinions on them, so y'all take it away.
Okay, I'll kick things off. I'll keep it nice, short and sweet. Okay, so I had a hard time trying to decide what book it is that I'm going to read because I thought this week was a good week for me. I saw some very interesting books. In particular, I saw Mothra, which had a very good concept. Conceptually, it was good. Okay, the cover art was good. I liked it. Okay, it appealed to me. There was a certain je ne sais quoi about it that appealed to the kid in me. I liked it. Okay, and the Godzilla book that I read, Godzilla versus X-Men, that gave me a nice feeling towards the whole kaiju thing that they're doing, So when I started, I went into it very optimistic, very happy, and I was let down. The artwork was very clustered, the inside. It felt like Daniel Warren Johnson, but with less balance to it, because he has that gritty way of drawing, but he balances it off where the grit is in the foreground, but the background tends to be a little less, so you're not overwhelmed with all of that, and you can make out clearly what it is that he's doing with the characters. No such thing in this book. The writing was atrocious. I mean, if it was written by somebody who started writing comics in primary school and they just reached first form. That's what the writing was like. And I was sorely disappointed because I wanted this to be good. And I was hurt. I figured, okay, that's...
You talking about Mothra? Are you talking about your book? Or are you just doing a Mothra detour?
No, that's my preamble. So once I got through all of that, I was like, clearly I'm not going to be reviewing this. And I was so hurt. I went back into my list and I saw the most amazing title on that list. I saw The Incredible Hulk and Doctor Strange. And I was like, threaten me with a good time, no? Yes. Okay.
I'm with you. I'm with
Yeah, magic and
I'm with
gamma
you. I'm with you
radiation.
so far.
Yes,
I'm with you
man.
so far.
I opened the book. There's Peter Parker pacing, and he's Peter Parker. Oh my God, Banner. Bruce Banner. He's walking up and down. He's pacing his outside Bleecker Street, and he's like trying to figure out, should he go in? And he's like, all right, let me go ahead in, man. And then he knocks on the door. One comes out, and they have this little back and forth. And I was like, okay, I'm liking this. I'm digging it. The dialogue is moving very nicely. I'm liking it. There's little quips here and there. Okay, that's fine. Like a jokey, different spin on it and whatnot, showing a different aspect of his personality. I don't know that much about Banner, but this is fine. Doctor Strange comes in, and the conversation between Banner and Strange was also chuckle worthy for me. I was like, man, that's some good stuff right there. And then we start to get into the plot, and then the book just started losing me. I was like, oh, don't do that. Don't do that. And what did we do? We went back and we explored territories that we've went through so many times before. Why? For no reason. What did we learn from this? Nothing. A whole book about nothing. Nothing to go on in this book. Hulk did not even make an appearance. Hulk did not even smash. Nothing. And then it ended. He came back from his journey back into the quips. The ending of the book felt like the beginning, where the dialogue was nice and fun and chuckle worthy, and it came to an end. I flipped back to the cover. I saw there was a second writer, because I saw it was J. Michael Straczynski, and I was like, yes, threaten me with a good time. I loved his work on Thor, and I've been a fan of his writing ever since. He can be hit or miss for me, but largely when he comes to these particular stories, I find he's more of a hit for me. And this was so disappointing. And then it occurred to me that that second writer may have been responsible for the parts of the story that I actually enjoyed, because the dialogue didn't feel very Straczynski-ish.
I'm looking at it here, Glenn. I don't think there's a second writer from what you see. Okay,
It's
credits
not?
right now. Yeah, it's all
Okay.
he did.
It's all him?
There. Yeah, you didn't mention. I hope you read the backup story as well. You didn't mention that.
Dude, I started to read the backup story, and I died on the first page. I was like, I'm not going any further than this. I just skimmed to look at the artwork to see what it is that was going on, but I didn't read any further. After dealing with the first part of the book, the first story, I think I had enough.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Well, for me, unless you rest of y'all want praise this book before I start, or should I go ahead?
Can I say something?
Yeah, you take it away.
Yeah, I have to agree with Glenn on a lot of his points. I found the quips and like the subtle humor and comedy in that. That's what kind of sold that book for me. I was just enjoying it, and it did kind of give you a slightly different take to how Banner perceives the Hulk, but it's not like it actually did anything, because even if this is an event that did happen, it doesn't change current events that's happening now, which kind of undermine that whole standalone novel. But the little quips of humor here and there between him and Wong, between him and Strange, those were just excellent. Like what the thing I loved about it was when Banner was threatening to sing, because Banner's like, yo, I'm here to see Strange, and Wong is being all like aloof, like, do you have an appointment? And he's like, no. Is the world ending? No. Well then, he's busy. And Banner's like, listen here, Wong, I will stand out here and sing at the top of my lungs. And Wong immediately just lets him in. Wong is like, no, never mind. The doctor will see you now. Okay. I've heard your singing once before. I couldn't eat solid foods for a week afterwards. I had to go outside and take a fresh breath of air and pontificate how a man singing could be so terrible that you can't digest solid foods for a week. That just had me. And then they have him in the foyer waiting, and he decides, okay, maybe I'll practice a little, warm up the pipes. The moment this man starts to sing a little loud, Doctor Strange cape come down. Yes, I was like, okay. And the buddy's like, why are you here? You don't even have ears. So I love that little jokey joke. I love the humor in the book.
Yes, sir.
I read this book. I don't have anything different to add, so my comments are going really short. I agree with both Glenn and Michael. The rest of it isn't worth toilet paper to wipe your ass. So yeah.
Right. I guess we all read a different book because this book can eat my ass. This was some hot trash. The juvenile, ridiculous, silly MCU style humor, the quips, P jokes, breaking the fourth wall. I don't know if Straczynski's trying to audition to write for the MCU, but that's what came across to me. This was just terrible. On top of that, you got Carrie Ann Rachel Dodson doing the cover, a beautiful cover. And then you got somebody in here drawing like the no graduate third form or something. This felt so cheap. I'm asking myself, do these guys have a movie coming out? Where is their Doctor Strange book that you have put zero effort into? If you did something special, I can understand you put on a book, but it feels like they're just doing this to tie into something coming out. And as far as I know, there isn't. It was just painful to read. We revisited the Hulk's origin. Fine, I don't mind that, but I've seen it 100 times. It gives us a reason for the Hulk being for the gamma rays to manifest the way to do a Bruce Banner. That was kind of interesting, but the book was just poor. I did not enjoy it at all. And opposite to what you guys say, I actually found the second story more readable. The art was more cartoonish and fun. I actually did not mind it. It was by some lady, Natasha Bustos. I've never heard it before. Another Straczynski story. A short 4 or 5 page story about them vanquishing some Cthulhu type monster back to the outer reaches or whatever. That was cool. I don't know what was the point of the story either. I'm surprised you got old Agatha Harkness instead of the young, sexier one. But I don't know where this book came in, where this story. I don't know why this book happened. I don't know if somebody owed Straczynski some money or somebody lost a bet. But I am mad that Glenn made me read this, and I am not gonna forgive him anytime soon. Yeah.
This is the second week you're mad.
Yeah, y'all keep doing this to me. First read song.
Wait, I'm making you read it.
You
I don't
put it
make
on.
Wait, we're supposed
That's
to
his
be reading
read.
every book on the list? I thought that was just mine.
I like to read what you guys read so I can discuss it.
Well, I'm sorry if I don't consider you when I'm picking my book, bro.
I was so mad when I read this book. I was like, what is this?
But there's a reason why we're getting these books, though. It seems like somebody decided that they were going to greenlight some kind of series with these like team ups, which is supposed to be team ups. The next one I think is Spider-Man and somebody else.
Well, the last one, there's a series by GMS. He's done the one with Nick Fury and Fing Fang Foom. There was another one before that.
These silly books.
Yeah, I don't know what's the point of these issues, and it actually weirdly fits the topic of one shots or like limited series versus ongoing continuity. But like this isn't helping the case.
It did not like it.
Sometimes we would look at stuff like this, right? And we'd make comments like, yo, that was ridiculous. What's the point of these stuff, right? In a way, I feel that's kind of hypocritical of us because comics to me is supposed to play with the absurd, right? Comics are just an absurd medium anyway, medium for the absurd. The idea is to play around with ideas and concepts. They don't always have to be great. But at the same time, though, we will come across some really trash books. And this was definitely one of them. Because it was a good concept. I see Hulk and I was expecting, okay, maybe Doctor Strange encountered a bunch of, interdimensional beings that are highly resistant towards magic. And so the only person that can help him is the Incredible Hulk.
And Doctor Strange have a lot of history. Yeah.
Their defenses.
Yeah, and when he had a strand, the Hulk on the crossroads, when the Hulk had gone crazy. They have a lot of history. We're going to play on that, not this bullshit.
They actually did kind of make a joke about that. They made a wisecrack about that.
This book was poorly done. The art is very poor.
I don't know. I think the art was sufficient for what the book was.
It was barely. That's the problem. That's the problem with Marvel right now. They're just getting serviceable artists. People could just do the job. There's no polish or style or flair to the art in Marvel anymore. Just get basic artists. This guy could never have gotten work at Marvel back in the early 2000s or the late 90s. Never.
What do you want instead of you? Do you want somebody who's gonna sit down and trace porn screenshots? Is that what you want?
I'm not saying that because I want good art. You got to bring up Greg Land. That was a connection. We got good artists out there. Just pay them a little bit more money. Stop getting these guys that are willing to work from third world. Sorry, and again, not say it the wrong way. These guys from third world countries are willing to work for bottom dollar and putting out this product.
Are you saying that creators from small islands like Barbados can't get what?
See what I'm saying? You see, you try to put words in my mouth.
Ma.
That is what I'm just saying. That's what we're getting. There are good Italian and South American artists. You got guys like Pep Larraz. Those guys can draw, but then you got other guys like this who, you know, I mean, what is this? What is this? This would never have gone back in the day.
Is this Pep Daraz? Would you bring him in to do art on a single one shot that is not even supposed to be that relevant a story?
This book shouldn't exist. So no Pep Larraz, nobody. I don't like it.
All right, let's move on with our other review.
Rating -4 out of 5.
You feel strongly about this?
Real strong.
-1 on the Rotten Tomato list.
Yeah, no sequel. Don't bring it.
All right, I'm gonna jump in here to try to keep this moving with my book for this week. This was a book that had me very, very interested when I heard the initial announcement. Dan Slott, who I credit with getting me back onto Spider-Man. He made the jump finally from Marvel over to DC, and he is writing a new series, part of a DC Summer of Superman initiative called Superman Unlimited. Yeah, I was really hyped. I read it. I am less hyped now, but I'm willing to give Dan Slott a chance. Unlike some people in this chat, you know,
Michael?
Question, is Dan Slott writing this book by himself or with his assistant? Yeah, Dan Slott not the dude, the fat dude that writes Spider-Man. Doesn't he have a dude that does help him with his writing?
I have no recollection of that.
Swear that he did. Okay. Remember they did the thing with him on Disney Plus. They did an interview. You saw that, right?
I don't.
Like a mini documentary they did on Dan Slott.
No, you want me to go look at it? But yeah, so this book is Dan Slott's first gig at DC, and he's writing one of their biggest characters, Superman. The basic plot for this book is there is this giant asteroid coming towards Earth. Superman, you know, he's having a good day. Before this, he's, you know, playing around, doing basic Superman stuff, saving cats from trees. He tells this young lady who is busking guitar under a tree randomly
People
somewhere.
still do that in 2025? There's still cats in trees?
Supposedly. He tells this young lady that he listens to her music and he really likes it, and he, you know, gives her some money. I'm not sure how much, but he's having a good day as Superman. Then he gets this announcement from the League that there's this giant asteroid coming towards the planet. Superman, being Superman, he flies out to stop it. He discovers that the asteroid is apparently made of this metal that isn't going to have any use really until like the 30th century. And you know, he says he's going to do his usual Superman thing, give it a mighty blow and shatter this thing to bits. Turns out that the asteroid is covered in this thin layer of this material, and it is actually a solid chunk of kryptonite. Probably the single biggest chunk of kryptonite I've seen in continuity since Jeff Loeb's Superman Batman series. Anyway,
Yeah, this is basically a mountain of kryptonite.
yeah, a mobaton of kryptonite. And if you've been reading Superman, you know, and this is green kryptonite, by the way. So the original OG kryptonite, green kryptonite, a metric ton of this stuff, and it's still hurling towards Earth. So Superman has to save Earth at the risk of his own well-being, which he does. And then the story jumps forward. It is revealed that Superman has been unconscious for some like 3 months, and the state of things has changed in the world. He was able to mitigate the damage, deflect the asteroid of this giant mountain of kryptonite enough to, you know, save lives. It did still impact Earth. There is no this new country, which is, you know, the leading country in the world now, because they're the ones that have exploited this new resource, which is this giant amount of kryptonite. And the status quo for Superman's fellow Kryptonians and hybrids on Earth has changed because kryptonite is now more readily available than chewing gum. So the Kryptonians on Earth are having a rough shake. And but there's a plot twist. Superman's status quo personally has changed. I don't want to give any spoilers, but his exposure to this excessive amount of kryptonite has changed things for Superman on a personal level, as well as for the other Kryptonians on Earth. Yeah. So after reading it, I'm willing to see where Slot goes with it.
Question.
I know what ED means, but this is a different.
He sounded so ominous. He's like it's a status quo change for Superman. So I was like, I hope it's not Edie.
Oh God! But I can't be. He's the Man of Steel after all. So.
Oh my lord. Anyway,
Yeah.
question that I have. Superman don't know about he don't know about Neil deGrasse Tyson and Star Talk. He never checked the podcast. Anybody who have internet and access to YouTube already knows that you do not blow up an asteroid, you deflect it. That is Superman's fault. That's Superman's fault. He needs to watch more science channels.
Listen,
I will even be willing to one-up you there, because the Justice League called Superman to inform him that this mountain-sized meteorite is towards Earth. I'm sorry, you're telling me that an entire collective of superheroes whose sole mission is to protect the Earth called one person?
No.
They did say that all the other big guns were otherwise occupied. He was the only buddy available at the time. Yeah.
So Superman, so you said the rest of the super family was there, right? Why did Superman alone go up there? You could have had literally 2, 3 of them.
That's just how the story set up.
Michael, the Justice League has already listed what everybody's responsibilities are. When there's asked, Superman deal with that. Anything going on with the moon, Superman deal with that. You check. Invading aliens, Superman deal with that.
I'm surprised nobody could scan the asteroid and tell what its mineral composition was.
The inner tone or whatever metal was like, it's like lead. You can't tell. You can't see through it.
Michael, the only people who scans asteroids, Michael, the only people who scan asteroids are big corpos. Okay? People that want to mine asteroids scan asteroids. Everybody else just check the size to see if it's as big as Texas or not, and then they look to shift it.
Mike scanned it. They scanned it, but the sheet, the covering, they couldn't get through it. That was the whole point of covering the kryptonite in this material.
Wow.
That this is clearly a plot. Somebody said
One more question. Sorry if I sound patronizing. Why is Krypton still spewing kryptonite at Earth?
I don't know. Okay, so this is how I always saw it. When Superman, when Superman's ship left Krypton, and it created the wormhole or whatever, dragged huge chunks behind the ship. For some reason, the ship got there a lot faster, and we can be continually bombarded by these pieces. I don't know where this mountain-sized one came from. I don't know who harnessed it. I don't know who drenched it in Innertron, whatever it is. But there's always going to be kryptonite coming. Yeah, is a crutch, and I hate it. But that's what else you can do.
Sorry for preempting your point, Mark. Apologies.
But
I have
so many questions. Very interested to see how this goes for Earth, because the last guy I know that messed around with kryptonite, he got cancer, and that was Lex Luthor. So I want to see how.
Mark, go ahead, Gibson. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mark.
Floor is yours.
All right, those are all points. All questions I have. I feel I'm willing to give Dan Slott a chance, but I feel that he's dragging his, let me say, bad habits from Marvel over to DC. Like how much there's literally been a krypton's worth of kryptonite on Earth since Superman arrived. So much kryptonite. Like even before this particular story, kryptonite was relatively easy to get. Everybody seems to have kryptonite when they're facing off against Superman. Batman has his hidden kryptonite ring. Batman has synthesized kryptonite. Lex Luthor has synthesized kryptonite. You have people like Firestorm who could synthesize kryptonite. You have Green Lanterns. Like what was it? There was a story arc back in the day where for some reason Superman took over the world. Yeah, his army of Superman robots, and Batman knew the formula, the chemical composition to kryptonite. He got Martian Manhunter to transfer that knowledge to Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern, so Kyle could make kryptonite from his Green Lantern ring. There's an overabundance. So the Green Lantern rings are will based. So the simple answer is as long as their will is strong enough, maybe.
I don't think that's
Kyle.
anyway.
Kyle's ring was different. Kyle's ring was different, and Kyle's approach to being a ring bearer was different. Let me just say that. But moving on.
Yeah, moving on.
There's already
a little thing. Because kryptonite now, it's not really the rock, it's the radiation. So as long as yeah, because Lex Luthor actually taught the Chinese Green Lanterns how to do it, and they did it perfectly fine.
That's the other thing, right? In continuity, being a sufficient amount of kryptonite is harmful, deadly to humans, not just Kryptonians. So a mountain of kryptonite on Earth should have irradiated that part of the Earth, right? But somehow you have what is known DC's version of Wakanda, where there's this entire like advanced country powered by kryptonite. I am curious to see where this story goes, but I kind of expected better from Dan Slott. And the other thing that stands out for me is that this book doesn't fit with the DC All-In publishing initiative. It references some of the current continuity, like the Justice League Saga and that kind of stuff, but it feels like wildly narratively different from the rest of the DC All-In. It just feels weird. So yeah, I want to see what happens next, but with a lot of caveats.
Yeah, okay. Well, for me, like I said, just like you, Dan Slott being one of my all-time favorite writers, as you would know.
Lies.
I was really excited to see his take on this Superman Unlimited book. Like that the fact that he has a handle on Superman himself. He's written in character true to who he is. He has the Superman values, the Superman things, like you said, stopping the little boy from getting eaten by a lion, helping homeless people, all that kind of stuff. The Raphael Albuquerque art was fantastic. I loved it. It works for me. But the book itself has definitely fallen short. I hate relying on kryptonite as a crutch for a weakness Superman. I think it's ridiculous that there's so much in it. The whole concept of kryptonite being able to be synthesized by Green Lanterns or even scientists creating without having, you don't have the elements. The elements to create kryptonite should not exist on Earth. It's an alien substance. I hate the fact that it's so, but I hate the fact we can make it. Somebody short of Firestorm who has literal superpowers, it shouldn't be able to be created in a lab. I don't care who Lex Luthor is. Back in the 80s when Superman got reintroduced after Crisis, it was just that little piece that Lex Luthor had in a ring. That was the same one that gave him cancer and then was passed. Then Batman got a hold of it and Batman kept it in a safe for emergencies. There should not be kryptonite laying all over the place. It's lazy, and I kind of expected more from Slott. I am going to read it because it is Slott, and I just want to see what he does second. But this is the least favorite thing I've seen from the Superman office in the last year or so. And I am not invested as yet, but I'm going to give it a second chance.
I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my head around a few key factors because it feels like Dan Slott is one of those, like he went to Asian driving school. He came in with his story and he decided, I go left now, good luck everybody else. Because he's taking factors that are known to should not be able to work and just kind of like dusting over them and ignoring certain things completely. Like, I mean, kryptonite it's poisonous in large amounts, even to humans, yet you have a mountain-sized island of it, apparently, with people living on it, harvesting it, mining it, not a thing happening to them. Also, the time frame don't make sense to me. I mean, Mark, how long did you say Superman was basically unconscious? 2 months?
3 months. They birthed an entire advanced
civilization in 3 months.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Here's the thing about kryptonite. It's not even to say it's the crystalline technology of Krypton. If that was the case, I could understand that. But all it is irradiated rock. It is simply irradiated pieces of Krypton. That's why Green Lantern rings can simulate it, because all they need to simulate is the radiation. So how in the world you getting an advanced civilization in 3 months from cancer stones?
Come on, humans cannot even properly handle like radioactive material. They're like we're literally digging holes into the ground to bury radioactive waste. Yes, I know comics are fantastic and absurd and all that kind of stuff, but a 3 month turnaround.
I mean, just take it for what it is. Slot just wants to tell a story, and this is the easiest way to get to where he wants to go. I don't think we should get really hung up on
Exactly,
kryptonite.
like Asian driving school. Because you can't tell that much of a resource land in the world, and the big countries don't fight for it immediately. And so, okay,
Well, you mean again what they can do? Invade the low country? It landed in the country's waters, so they have.
You know, come on, Wade. You know that what's his name? General Wade Ealing, DC's version of Thunderbolt Ross. Yeah,
Google look at you like, yo, you look a little oppressed over there.
like
You know,
It's American freedom.
how has the
Yo,
Justice League
police force.
has the Justice League not stepped in? The single biggest threat.
But I mean, it's not an illegal substance to have. It's a rock that landed in somebody in a country's waters. They have legal ownership of it. The Justice League can't just say, "Yeah, this can hurt Superman, so we confiscating that." I don't think that's a thing they could do.
Ecological impact.
Sniff money. That's all the incentive they needed. What? We can make money from this? Freedom time.
And here's the joke, right? The preeminent human kryptonite expert, Lex Luthor, isn't involved, and somehow you're able to build this whole advanced civilization.
Lex,
Yes, that's my point.
He's not gonna interfere with stuff like that.
So who else is going to be able to have a 3 month turnaround time on kryptonite?
I have a question. I have a question which stems from this story, actually, having to do with the writers themselves. Because, okay, so we're currently seeing Dan Slott taking his swing at Superman. Before that, there was Bendis, right? We see Zdarsky on Batman, and so on. So my question is, have there ever been a Marvel writer that made the jump to DC that has been successful at DC?
That's a big question.
For my money, Zdarsky has been the best so far, and that run gets a lot of flack from people. I liked it. Everybody does it. Zdarsky, if you read Zdarsky's, was it Dark Knight? There's a 12-issue mini where he tells the origin of Bruce Wayne, how Bruce Wayne trains and travels, and that's the best Batman I've read in years. Other than that, you read that one?
That's the book where he's a boy, he's a child.
He's like a early 20-something, and he's in Tibet and stuff, and he's training, and he meets the guy who I think becomes, was it Ghost? You know the guy that isn't all white, that I think, yeah. That's the best transition. It's like, I guess what Glenn's trying to say is like, Marvel writers have a style, how they write this type of stories. That doesn't seem to translate quite well to DC. And it feels kind of like that's what Slott is struggling with. I don't even know what to say about that.
The thing is with DC versus Marvel, DC is at a higher caliber. DC has always been more fantastical, more epic, more high concept.
Less grounded.
Well, Marvel tends to work a lot better at the grounded, like street level stories, where the fantastical in DC is treated as day to day. Where for Marvel, the fantastical is an event. If that makes sense. I don't know. I can't think of any of the big Marvel writers to have made that jump.
Not in modern times, at least, for sure.
I mean, Bendis did some cool stuff.
We don't talk about Bendis.
Okay, sorry. He who shall not be.
Let's not go.
John
Bendis did right. That's John Byrne. Right.
He did the jump to DC, and I think he did well, right? He did a Superman.
He's the one. Yeah, he's the one who recreated Superman post-crisis. He gave us the Marvel version of Superman. People don't like knowing in retrospect, but I think it was fantastic.
You mean Man of Steel?
Yeah, the original Man of Steel, the 6-issue mini or 4, where he redefined Superman post-crisis. He got rid of the whole Superboy stuff. There was only one type of kryptonite. He powered down. He nerfed Superman, so to speak. He wasn't as strong. And people say it was like a Marvelization of Superman. And that's the Superman we've had. I mean, they slowly put him back up to pre-crisis levels. But he's the one who did. You should read. You need to read the Byrne Superman. He did the first 6, and then he did a run on the main title. There was Superman, which was just all Superman. Then there was Action Comics, which was kind of like a Superman team up every month with somebody from the DC universe. It was great.
I remember reading that, but look at that. I'm pretty sure I read that because you had Clark wasn't he moved away from Clark being like in the Chris Reeve movie where he
was pretty cool.
Yeah, he was more like cool and suave, and he wasn't hiding his physique as much.
Right. Yeah. So when Lois went to his apartment, I saw he had a weird machine and stuff like that to explain what.
Yeah, I read that.
I also did.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying Bendis also did. He did Batman Unlimited. I think that's what it is. It was a while back, and that was actually pretty good. That was his Superman work, but his Batman was good in my opinion.
Because Batman works as a grounded character.
True.
Whatever. Despite what the God fans say, Batman, I think, is a lot more narratively consistent when he is street level, and street level seems to be what a lot of these Marvel longtime writers, that's their bread and butter. And is always grating. Well, again, I don't want to do spoilers for Superman Unlimited. I don't know if Superman has been nerfed. That still remains to be seen. But again, I don't want to give spoilers here. But it would be weird, like having a giant chunk of kryptonite just existing on Earth, and the two main takeaways are Kryptonians are getting their asses handed to them, and there's this whole new Kryptonian or Kryptonite Wakanda equivalent. I mean, there should be more than that. Yes, this is one issue. Yes, there's more room to run, but is a very Marvel type issue. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's Superman Unlimited. Mike, I think you're up next.
Yes. Well, my book for this week was I was going to go with Hulk and Strange, but I stumbled upon another Hulk per se, and I had to cover that because it also featured one of my favorite characters, Dakin, and that is from it's issue 6 of the Wolverine issue, the Wolverine story currently going, that's being written by Benjamin Percy. So it's basically documenting Dakin's journey after his death at the hands of Sabretooth, and then he was resurrected by a demon named Braga Gull. Not sure if I'm saying that right, but yeah. So he's now on this journey trying to, reconnect himself in a sense. And he just rested the journey. He had to slowly, remember who he was, come to terms with what he is now. He even had to, go to hell and have a little kind of one-on-one, not a complete fight, but a little one-on-one with Mephisto over control for Braga Gull, and that concluded. And now he's back on Earth, fresh and healed and everything. And he has basically gone to work for the Hellfire division, that is like a shadow organization under the government that specializes in studying and attaining the power and technology of hell. And he is basically working with them now to try to reclaim the body parts of this being that they're calling the Hell Hulk, that looks like it's a weird amalgamation between Tammuz or Tammuz, or what they're calling him now, Enkidu. So it looks like a mashup between that and the Infernal Hulk that they once had from that other timeline. And I'm like, okay. And they're saying they're putting this thing, or they're retrieving the body parts to try to keep the world safe from him, but they're retrieving the body parts and putting him back together. And I'm like, well, that's a stupid idea. But I want to see where that goes. Because this is a big, massive, hulking, infernal-looking thing. And if he goes toe-to-toe with Dakin, who is now the Wolverine, that is a fight I'm very much interested in seeing.
Your picks are always consistently on brand, Mike. I'll give it that.
I read this book too because Mike put it on the list. It was not the worst thing I've ever read, but it felt very basic for Marvel. But I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I had no emotional connection to it. I just know Dakin is Wolverine's son. The concept of Wolverine initially is, that's interesting. That's cool. I don't need it to be long-term book. And now we got Hell Hulk. I literally rolled my eyes, but it wasn't boring. I didn't go like, God, this is painful. I wasn't mad for reading it. Like I was mad for reading Doctor Strange and Hulk, but I wouldn't read the next issue. I just read it for the show and it was okay.
I mean, you have to admit that bike is pretty sweet.
The whole Halverine thing for me is somebody snorting a line of chopped up bushes and thinking that combining Ghost Rider and Wolverine is a capital idea.
It reminds me of the Weapon H, the Hulk Wolverine thing. It's like, what else we doing it?
I will tolerate no Weapon H disrespect.
Well, that's what you're getting.
But like I all right. The sole hook for me for this book is Dakin. I think that he is another one of Wolverine's many children who has gotten a terrible shape. So there's like sympathy there, being torn apart by Sabretooth and Scarabo.
I haven't read any of the Halverine books, but I will say this. I felt like the Halverine is a missed opportunity for Marvel for Donny Cates to get his re-entry back into Marvel. I know Marvel don't want anything to do with Donny Cates, but with a concept like Halverine, he is the man. You take a Ghost Rider and a Wolverine and you fuse them together, you give them flames, chains, and claws. You throw in a Hell Hulk with that, and Donny Cates can work magic.
If somebody wants to see long term, that can sustain a whole book.
No, man, a Halverine book don't need more than 12 issues, to be honest. But I can see where he would be a character that does guest appearances. I can see that.
Yeah. I just think it's one of those concepts that, a kid would say, what if you merge Wolverine with Ghost Rider? And yeah, that's cool. And yeah, it's cool, but are we really making this a thing?
I don't know. I find it would just only supplement him. And it's not to say he's, Ghost Rider. He just is possessed by a demonic spirit.
Well,
and besides,
what would have been a good combination of characters? I think Archangel should have been a vampire. Yeah, Angel from X-Men.
I'm trying to see it, but wouldn't his healing powers conflict with his own vampire powers?
Let me not talk about healing powers.
All we need is one writer to not know anything about Angel and to just write the story. That's all we need.
I mean, visually and conceptually, any character is basically that looks like an angel being a vampire that's an interesting.
Bendis gave him cosmic fire wings at one point.
Yeah, I remember. Right? That was when the young X-Men came back to or something. I think was it.
And I mean, he had the hots for what was it? X-23.
They were actually dating.
Yeah.
Any other reviews?
Hello.
Oh yeah, we could do a crossover, like have Batman and Halverine link up. That'd be awesome.
All right, Glenn. You relax.
Here's something about Wolverine too. If you give him the Hellfire, if you give somebody like Dakin Hellfire and chains, then you make him an all-purpose fighter at any range. Because Dakin is a close quarters kind of fighter. But you give him Hellfire and chains, then he's close, mid, and distance fighter. You can't get away from him. On top of that, he basically has something stronger than a spider sense now called an infernal sense.
You think about that too much, Michael.
Clearly. I mean, whoa. Anyway, so I think I got my review left to do. This week, I think I've been doing all DC books so far, but this week with the exception of the Image book, but I finally gone into a Marvel book that I think it's worth talking about, and that is Moon Knight Fist of Khonshu. And I don't recall which issue this was. It was the latest one. I have been enjoying what Jed McKay has been quietly and consistently cooking over this little corner that is Moon Knight. I think this is the third, or is it just the second volume of his run? I know he had a regular one, then this one is Fist of Khonshu, but I can't remember. I think it might have been the third one. Anyway, Moon Knight has gone through a bunch of shakeups. He died and he came back, for one. The latest one is that his sentient ghost house on the Midnight Mission has been murdered at the hands of this mercenary / assassin. This woman called, her last name's Carver. She was in the army and everything, and she has this magical death, this magical soul-stealing death sword, and she works for this Asgardian drug lord. So I know that sounds crazy. There's a whole bunch of stuff thrown into one there, but it's pretty wild, but it's cool. This Asgardian drug lord called Fairchild has framed Moon Knight in the eyes of the public and the police as creating this new highly potent, highly addictive drug that kills you if you don't get your hit once you start taking it. He's driven Moon Knight and his friends into hiding. And, in typical batshit Moon Knight fashion, Moon Knight has decided to challenge this guy into MMA style fist fight in a ring, in front of an audience. Whoever loses has to slink back into the shadows and relinquish control or whatever, that kind of thing. Prior to this, Moon Knight did not know who Fairchild really was, his true nature, but he gets his ass beat soundly, and he learns that Fairchild is an Asgardian. He's an Asgardian commoner. He's not one of the gods, so he's not like Thor powered, but an Asgardian commoner is still superior physically to a human being. So that's what's been going on to catch you up. But in this issue, it starts out with Moon Knight in chains. He's like in the astral plane or something, and his soul is in chains. We learn through flashbacks that he's been murdered by Carver using the soul-stealing sword, which is called Ginnar, or Jinnar. I don't know. They had a fight. She attacked him, and it turns out that she murders him, and he's in the hands. No, his soul's in the hands of this Ginnar, who manifests on the astral plane as this big dragon. He's all smug and stuff because, I got you, Moon Knight, you're mine now. I hoard all these souls. Dragons take gold and treasure, but I take souls, whatever, whatever. But it turns out that this was all a big scam by Mark Spector, aka Moon Knight. He allowed Carver to kill him because he knows that when the dragon tries to harvest his soul is already owned by Khonshu. So this pisses Khonshu off, obviously, because you're trying to take what's mine. Khonshu shows up and puts his foot up Ginnar's ass. Hector asks Khonshu to spare Ginnar. Don't kill him, because part of Moon Knight's plan to defeat Fairchild, the Asgardian, is to use this big-ass Asgardian sword to do it. So that's where we end up in this issue. Like I said, Moon Knight's last 2, 3, 4, even the runs before the McKay runs have been good. We had Lemire on there for a while. We even had Warren Ellis doing the book. McKay's run, it hasn't been, what I would say, groundbreaking or that different, but it's solid character work and solid lore building, a lot of action. He's even dug into Moon Knight's history and brought back up a lot of obscure villains that you would have seen back in the 70s and the 80s. People like, you got it. That you would go on Wikipedia for, who's this? But they work really well. We've even seen characters like 8-Ball, which is a villain with a giant 8-ball from pool cue ball on his head. And then you got these concepts like the Midnight Mission, which is a sentient, like I said, ghost house that, traps people in rooms and teleports and does all kind of weird stuff that Moon Knight would have connected with it, so it listens to him. You got the art by Alessandro Capuccio. Yeah, I think that's it. He's been the main collaborator on this book. I think this issue was done by another guy, Dev Malia Pramanik, but Capuccio's been the main collaborator, and I'm not a fan of his work. It's this loose, scratchy style, and I feel about that kind of stuff. He does it with these weird, angular manga style layout panels, like panels at an angle, like twisted and slanted and slashed, looking like speed lines and stuff, which I don't really care for. But is a testament to McKay's writing a story that I've stuck with the book because I can see past that to really enjoy what's going on. It's a great book, and I don't know how much longer McKay has on it, but as long as he's on, I'm there as well. After doing ratings, I would give this book 4.25 out of 5. It was a good read. Anybody else reading Moon Knight this country?
Let's not start doing ratings with that sort of fractional mathematic book.
But so 4.25, that's what I get.
Wade, I agree with you. McKay has been doing the Lord's work very
Indeed.
quietly. The book is solid. There's hardly anything that I have an issue with in regards to the Moon Knight books. He's been on Moon Knight for quite a while now. I think almost as long as Zdarsky was on Daredevil. Because I think those two books started around the same time and it's still going. So, solid is definitely the word where that book is concerned. And I think that McKay, his grasp of the character is pretty good. He's not doing the trippy psychological thing that Lemire was doing with Moon Knight. Lemire's Moon Knight was my introduction to Moon Knight, and so not seeing that style of writing repeated again kind of threw me off for a while as to like what the heck is going on with Moon Knight. I thought it was all cerebral stuff. McKay has showed me that, Moon Knight is a flexible enough character that you can tell, much like with Batman, you can tell any story that you want with Moon Knight. And what he's been doing, introducing new and old concepts, blending them together, has been like truly, truly great. So yeah.
Okay, so I have a quick question because I'm actually reading the series of Moon Knight, but I have fallen behind a few chapters. But I want to know, when he was fighting Fairchild, was Fairchild using any Uru weapons against him?
It was a fist-to-fist, hand-to-hand fight.
Fist-to-fist, hand-to-hand, okay. Okay, that I can understand. If he was using any kind of Uru enchanted weapons, yeah, that fight would have gone south for him very quickly.
The thing that jumps out here at me is the power scaling in Marvel, where, let's be fair, Moon Knight is literally Marvel's Batman. Just as, well, no, crazier, but, the same approach, like gadgets and bloody fisticuffs and that kind of stuff. But to hear that a scrub Asgardian is giving him all the hands is hilarious. Yeah, we need more Asgardian immigrants into Marvel to shake things up, because that's always fun. I haven't been as dialed into Moon Knight as before. I think Wade has actually publicly taken me to task for not reading Moon Knight, the bastard. But anyway,
Much deserved.
whatever. It sounds interesting. It sounds fun. Yeah, that sounds. I'll easily give Wade credit here. That sounds that synopsis was engaging. Made me want to get out for sure. So yeah, I'll see if I can catch up on it. Maybe.
Not to get into the whole powers thing and that kind of thing again, but I distinctly remember there was a time when Moon Knight used to have like extra strength based on the phases of the moon. Like when the moon was full, he would be like extra strong, and the smaller the moon got, I think he would be weaker. That may be something misremembered, but I think that was a thing. And to be honest, if it wasn't a thing, I think it should be a thing. That sounds kind of cool.
But
Do you
hold on.
remember a mission like that, a power scaling like that for Moon Knight?
Moon Knight is. I'm pretty sure it was an event where Moon Knight beat the Avengers going to come in.
Don't
Yeah,
talk
he was
about
definitely empowered, but yeah, but that was
that was the nastiest cash grab that they ever decided to do with Moon Knight. The man came out from nowhere, and that happened so weird because Marvel was in the middle of an event with the Avengers. I think that was during Jason Aaron's run with the Phoenix tournament thing.
yeah,
And
because I think
middle of all of that,
had it as well.
right? In the middle of all of that, in comes Moon Knight with his own event where he whoops the entire Avengers, steal their artifacts and their weaponry, and I think even stole the Phoenix as well.
Yeah, he had the Phoenix Force for a while.
It was crazy.
He stole own hammer because apparently it was made of Uru.
That was some dumb shit.
That was
That was-
inspired.
To me, it's when he was fighting, I think it was T'Challa. And T'Challa is busting out every technique and move he knows. The man hit him with a shin kick of 10,000 fire ants. That has never left my brain. What kind of kick is that? And Moon Knight just hit him with a fist of control. Every move he throw, fist of control, fist of control, fist of control in the face.
He was literally spamming Fist of Khonshu like it was Street Fighter with Hadokens.
I think that's the thing that the reason why Moon Knight doesn't appeal to me. Moon Knight tends to work best when he's being his most absurd, and I can't take that much absurdity as a constant.
I
When
think they
you're
had
talking
a
about Moon,
I think they had a fun need for Moon Knight. I think just doing him as a Batman cutout wasn't working. He wasn't doing anything for the character. He wasn't moving. Like when Lemire landed, Lemire took it, as Glenn said, in this trippy direction, made it all cerebral and all about his mental instability and stuff. And everybody since then has kind of done that to varying degrees. So I guess that's where we are as with Moon Knight as a character now.
they can't do it. They cannot do it.
Are there any sane Marvel characters? Marvel seems to be a collection of characters with psychological issues.
Well, that's
Classified as sane. Okay, you can't be sane to want to go out there and do that shit.
But Marvel seems to take it to the nth direction.
I mean, that's how Marvel started. Marvel decided in the 60s to make characters that were quote unquote relatable with issues and problems and stuff, as opposed to what DC was doing. So no, there's no, everybody gotta be crazy or got a broken mental faculty.
It tends to reflect the times, right? And we found ourselves in our current decade with a lot of persons who are undergoing a lot of mental stresses and mental issues, right? Whether it's image problems, whether it is stress, whether it is personality disorder, gender issues and all of that kinds of stuff. We have people that are really going through it with that. So it would make sense that the comic characters reflect that.
I mean, having insomnia isn't giving me any superpowers.
That's because you're not part of the 616.
You can be Sleepwalker.
Or the new one, the LGBT guy, the gay dude, Somnus. Yeah.
Oh, I have no idea who that is.
Who's that?
You see, you don't read Marvel voices. Y'all showing y'all prejudice.
I'm sorry.
Well, let me not act as if I read that stuff either. See.
Well, I wanted to drop a couple of honorable mentions. I want to talk about Batman and Robin Year One. Quickly. I'm just mentioning it quickly, but Wade and Samney, beautiful retro art by Samney. And Wade is doing this like a deep dive into the relationship between Bruce and young Dick Grayson. Dick is very competent, but way too cocky. As much as I love this take on him and the whole dynamic duo as a whole, I just can't understand how Bruce putting up with him being such a little shit.
Yeah, put him red, yellow, and green.
He's a little turd. He's more obnoxious than Damien. Well, no, let me not say that. But he don't listen. He just go up and do his own thing. But I'm saying, Dick, don't do it. And he was like, whatever, Batman, dive off the building. And then Bruce will save him. My second honorable mention, well, would you look at that? Batman and Superman, World's Finest, number 39. Which is part 40. We Are Yesterday crossover. By Mark Waid, but this one with Clayton Henry. So this got a lot of time travel shenanigans, and know I feel about that kind of stuff. Love it. And the heroes are trying to make their way back to their rightful time. This is great stuff. We had actually showed a lot of humor, especially in that one panel with the show y'all guys when Superman from the past gave a little peek into his future when Lois Lane says what she says. So
mean with his son?
Yeah, when he gets that review that he has a wife and a gay son. So, like I said, Marvel was my pick of the week, but these two were from DC were, close runner-ups.
We talk about Michael, right? But Wade is just as bad,
Really?
He's worse.
You're just as bad. It's just that you're on a different end of the spectrum.
I don't obsess over Batman. I just recognize when he has a good book.
Your obsession lies in a very subtle way. It's hidden behind professionalism and expertise, but you're equally obsessed. My honorable mention is Vatican City by Mark Millar. Mark Millar is again one of those persons doing God's work, and I found that I was enjoying it. I think his choice of artist is a very bold choice because it works. For what it is, it works. Not my choice of artist, but again, it's one of those things where the artist can fit the story that you're telling. That particular type of art. It feels like a movie, right? Basically, vampires just raised up and took over the West, right? Within like 24 hours or 48 hours, some ridiculous short space of time, they've completely taken over the West, and they have laid siege to Vatican City, which they cannot enter because Vatican City is sacred ground, but there is a prize in the heart, the very bowels of Vatican City that is worth everything for the vampires. And they're waging war against a group of tourists that are inside Vatican City, surrounded by these vampires and their human thralls who are able to enter into the grounds to do their dirty work for them. 2 issues are out currently. Great read.
Yeah, I've been reading this as well. I love Millar, but like you said, the art, you say you found it suitable, I just find it painful. I don't know where Millar dug this at. He normally gets top tier talent to work with him, but It must have been some reason he picked this guy. I don't know. I'm gonna read anything he does. It doesn't matter who draws it, if it's just Stickman. So yeah, I agree with you. It was a good book. I just don't agree like the art.
I find Millar does have a tone, and he finds the artist that suits the tone of the story that he's going for.
Fair enough. He had another vampire book the other night, Nightclub. I would take
Yeah.
that guy.
Same guy?
The nightclub
Hmm?
with that
It's the same writer?
that artist was more functional. What do you mean if it's the same writer, Michael? Of course it's Mark Millar.
Glenn, you need to do something with this man.
I didn't know.
Dude, it's Mark Millar. You're in the group chat. You saw when Wade was ecstatic about the release. Come on, bro.
I shall read it.
Not only read it, pay attention to who write the books.
Yeah, that's how you find more good books.
I've told him this on multiple occasions. It's not a priority.
But no, we are gonna move on to our Alluhwi book for the week that we all read, and we all read Bridgeland, issue 1 this week. And as a special surprise for all you listeners out there, we have the creator and writer of Bridgeland right here with us to interview about his work.
Posted?
To be you'll see. I don't know. I don't know. You can see what I know. Roasted or lauded, I don't know. But here we have Mark Corporal Gibson. Yes, I'm calling you Corporal Gibson. Can you introduce your book and what it's all about?
Hi, everybody. Here I am with all of the enthusiasm of a man heading to his own execution. Inquisition. Interview. Yeah, that's what's happening. Right. So, Bridgeland Volume 1. It is a crime drama, and it is centered around these two families. One is and it's also set in Barbados, or an alternative to the real world of Barbados. Some similarities. Where these two families, one of them is underprivileged, one of them is crust of society, and they're connected by this tragedy that happened. And this is the first half of the entire story in Volume 1, and it spans a number of years. It starts with these two brothers who are in their early teens, and it stretches to when both brothers are adults. And yeah, lots of shenanigans, lots of drama involved. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Okay. So me on Bridgeland, I have to say I was really surprised. Well, I don't know if surprised, but I was really impressed. For me, it was better than the other Alluhwi books I would have read. It was some type mature storytelling, while some of the other books felt more like, some high school kids trying to make a comic book. Not bad, but it didn't have the polish that I felt was attached to Bridgeland. The characters were fleshed out. I got to know them, the motivations, the reason they did, the feelings they had. There was a couple of things I had. The art, for one, there was a part where I couldn't tell two characters apart. There was a girl, I don't want to call her a prostitute, but there was this escort girl, right? Her hairstyle was similar to the daughter, the rich guy. And at one point I was confused about who's who. But other than that, the storylines played out in terms of what happened in the beginning mattered in the end. It felt like you really had a outline on what you're reading, and you didn't really read it just like on the fly. I was actually engrossed. And I can tell you, when I got to page 88 or whatever it was, and I turned the page and there was no more, I kind of hollered. I was like, I was a little pissed. I guess so. That was a really good book. I am very impressed and proud to know that I know you for that one, but I would like to know when Volume 2 of Bridgeland is coming out. And that's my question for you in my interview. Yeah.
Yeah, that is high praise.
Yeah, I told you I wasn't laying up as getting roast or a lord, and it wasn't perfect, but it was damn good for me.
Oh, thanks. I've got the warm and fuzzies now. Bridgeland Volume 2 is out. So this book, Bridgeland, isn't new. For anybody listening who might be wondering, Bridgeland Volume 1 was originally published in 2014. This is how long ago this was originally published. I first published this through Amazon Create Space, which then got kind of like subsumed or changed over to KDP. So that's how long ago it was. That was like a November 2014. It came out in print the following year. So a bit of background. Bridgeland was originally intended to be a film. I had written it as a screenplay. We actually got, in terms of looking to turn it into a film, we actually got a good chunk of the way through pre-production. Did auditions. We had a table reading. And here's a bit of trivia for this episode. Alison Seeley Smith, who voiced Storm in the animated X-Men series, she actually hosted a table reading at her house for Bridgeland. And given her significant experience in terms of acting, it was always a very cool thing for her to do that, to be involved in any extent and giving the benefit of her experience. So that's a fond memory for this whole thing for me.
I didn't know what to expect when Wade selected this book for us to read. I was pleasantly surprised that I knew the author. I was like, great, that's a good start. And the cover, it had a pretty good looking cover. So I was already judging by the cover. And on the cover, I saw that Eric Jerome Dickey essentially gave this book his blessing. So I was like, what? Because I do know Eric Jerome Dickey. I had the pleasure of meeting him a few times. God rest his soul. And so that kind of gave me an inkling as to the quality of the book that I was going to start reading. And so I started reading it. The art style took me a minute to get accustomed to it, because again, you don't really encounter a lot of black and white comics anymore, but I think it worked well with this story, because to me there are things that went on inside this book that would not have been as impactful if they were in color. I think the black and white did a good service for it. I won't do any spoilers, but you reminded me just how tough jail could be. So I'll say that much. But I found myself, reminded me of how tough jail could be.
I didn't know you were in the company of a convicted felon. They reminded you spent time.
No, but I mean, I'm a veteran movie watcher, and I have seen movies like Shawshank Redemption and.
Okay, I thought you were speaking from personal experience. Carry on.
No, man, come on.
It reminded you, so I was like, wait, reminded you?
I am a well-behaved, a guy with brought up see, I'm a healthy, not necessarily a church boy, but I'm a house guy.
I thought you were in jail dropping soap, so.
No, calm down.
The way he phrased it a second ago, you have to start whispering like Glenn. You've been on the inside?
Man, shut up. So yeah, what I have read, like you guys, I've read more than one Alluhwi comics, and so far this one, I agree with Wade, is the best that I've read so far. Just off the strength of how easily I became immersed in the story, and that I started giving a crap about the characters and where this plot is going. There were multiple moments when there were things that happened that frustrated me, but that's the sign of good writing, in my opinion. If you can unsettle your reader, if you can frustrate them, if you can make them impatient, if you can make them fall in love, or any form of reaction. Once people are reacting to your stories, I think that is good. And on more than one occasion, I had some strong emotions regarding to the characters. I got pissed off at some of them. Others, I came around to them, because as time went on, you get to see perspectives and you get to, how should I put it? Not you get to empathize with the characters and their situations and so on. You'd be shouting at them, be like, "Man, open your mouth and talk, boss. Talk the things." And they just won't listen, because that's how some characters behave. But in regards to that, I was very much entertained there. I don't know how Wade got the two ladies mixed up. Maybe that's something saying about
Probably braids.
or my eyes, because I could clearly tell one was a slim.
And one was, I know you would notice that. I know you would notice the other one. Yeah.
Gosh, my bad manners is showing. I honestly get what you're saying, in that the both of them had kind of this locks braids thing going on there, and they seem kind of similar. There's a similarity there. They could be sisters, And I had the exact same reaction as Wade when I reached the end. I was like, man, I'm going to look, not this man have me reading this thing and there's nothing else for me to read. There's no follow-up. Where's part 2? And I was determined that I was going to make the writer's life a living hell when he came on the podcast.
Yes, yes.
Was stringing me along like this. But now that I know that part 2 is out, I will definitely go and take a look. Because I want to see how this thing ends.
So what I'm saying though, part 2, Gibson, is only in hard copy form. There's no soft copy to download or anything. I see one copy left on Amazon. Is that what that means?
One copy left on Amazon.
That's what it means.
So background for you guys, for the listeners, here's the making a comic, making a graphic novel in the Caribbean context is hard, and that is in general. For me, at the time, Bridgeland was my first comic or graphic novel project, and I wish I could say that things went smoothly, but it was a roller coaster throughout. So things, for instance, the fact that the story is split into 2 volumes is directly because of the realities of making a comic in the Caribbean. I can say that being my first comic project, mistakes were made, and it was very much a learning experience. There are things that happened with Bridgeland that I have made a conscious effort not to have happen again. The publishing landscape between now it's literally been a decade pretty much between when Bridgeland Volume 1 was published and now. Things for indie creators have changed dramatically, for sure. So there are a lot of factors, a lot of behind the scenes production level things that went on that contributed to the form and the format that Bridgeland exists in. Definitely is going to be available digitally on Alluhwi Comics. That is, Volume 2 will be available there.
Yeah, let me apologize. It is actually available on Kindle. I don't know where to see that. I guess it's one physical copy they have, and then it's also available on Kindle as well.
Yeah, that now makes a lot more sense. Yeah, so it would be available on Kindle as well.
My bad.
But the cool thing was, like, there are a lot of very cool things for me as a creator from the whole Bridgeland series. Figuring out how to get this thing published from here in the Caribbean, I still see it as and published worldwide. I still see it as an accomplishment for me. I remember randomly Googling Bridgeland years ago and finding it online available all over the place on Barnes and Noble, there's Indigo in Canada. I even found it on one retailer, a German book site, and the entire site's in German. And I'm like, here's my book. That was kind of cool. Having a review from Eric Jerome Dickey was also really, really cool. I didn't get a chance to meet him in person. Our entire interaction was online, but he agreed to do it, to read and review it. And his turnaround time was like, it wasn't any more than 2 days between him saying, yeah, he'll read it, and then him sending back what I think is an amazing review. So the quote on the cover, that was just a line, but it still is a big impact for me to know that he was this well-known, successful writer, and he made time to read my first graphic novel and to give a very positive review. So that's cool.
Mark, you would be tying all of this together. Storm, Eric Jerome Dickey, and all of that. He did a graphic novel for Storm.
Yeah. It was actually the marriage issue? But he actually wrote the story that was the original, I guess, hookup between Storm and T'Challa, and that's totally like gangbusters.
Yep.
I think that was his first foray into comics, speaking subject to correction. But yeah, man, he knocked that one out of the park. Anyway, Michael, I don't think you had a chance to talk about your thoughts about Bridgeland. Look at me doing host duties.
Yeah, well,
All right, you want nothing?
I'll keep it short and sweet. I was pleasantly surprised by Bridgeland. I opened it and I was like, okay, the black and white, I didn't get it, but in all honesty, the art to me was better than in the other ones that I've read so far. I was like, yeah, this is looking like some actual professional shiz. I like it. The story was engaging and fun. One little weird gripe that kept hitting me in the back of my head was like, there's not enough dialogue in this. But I understand, you had to write it in a way that it's readable to all audiences. But I was like, Caribbean people don't talk like this. That was the one gripe I had about it. But other than that, I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the art. And yeah, I don't mind reading that second volume.
Yeah,
Michael,
I agree with Michael on that a little bit, but the dialect, but like Michael as well, you understand the reason for it. Well, you can't read disobedience.
I
So-
found before you say, I found that the characters, maybe it was just me internally doing it, but I thought they sounded like Mark.
Yeah, I can see that.
In that they sounded like they knew standard English. They went to school, they're educated. So I could still see the Bajan, but it wasn't as strongly,
I didn't realize that Mark wrote that book until we started talking about it.
Boy, check the authors and then when you read books.
I don't understand. Just don't get it. How do you read books and don't know who's reading them? Or
Okay, I saw the name. I just didn't correlate it to our Mark.
Oh, you don't know his last name?
Yeah, so I didn't correlate it to our Mark.
okay.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So tonight our discussion is gonna be we're gonna dive into, I guess, what we call two different storytelling styles in comics: the endless saga, so to speak, versus a finite tale. Should comics run forever, like Batman and Spider-Man, constantly evolving, never truly ending, or is there more weight and power and value in telling a story like Invincible or Preacher, one that has a beginning, a middle, and an end? So do comics benefit from having a clear beginning, middle, and end, or do we prefer the eternal storytelling loop of the big twos books, like I said, seeing Batman, Superman, that kind of thing? For me, the pros of having completed story, the pros and cons, but let me just start with the pros for me in terms of completed stories. We got, you have what I would say is narrative integrity. The story has a planned arc, the beginning, start, middle, and end. There are emotional payoffs. You get satisfying conclusion. Well, most times, some books don't end well, but you know what I mean. You got creative consistency. You got one writer or one creative team overseeing the whole thing. So you get, one feel and no drop in quality, that kind of stuff. You got accessible entry. Your readers could just jump on board and they don't got to deal with 60 years of continuity. Yeah, that's about it for the pros of completed stories, finite stories. So I can let you guys jump in now and, give your views. And I got more to say, but I don't want hogging like.
Okay. This somehow feels like a conversation about continuity in a sort of way, like a de facto conversation about continuity, because it does play an important role in there. Honestly, I don't think that any one style is better than the other. I think they play their roles very well. They have their place within the whole comic environment, right? Because we've seen great examples of comics of various lengths: 3-issue minis, 5, 6 issues, 10, 25, 50. We've seen them. And then, of course, there's the Goliath ongoing ones that have been, pretty much going for the past 60 to 80 years. And that's a lot of history there. They serve different purposes, like the ongoing soap opera. I think it's essential that we actually have those, because continuity, it has this thing of uniting readers together. It's a common thing, a common idea, a common concept that we all share together. It's a shared history, and persons who are jumping in brand new can be part of a conversation that is older than them, and they have the privilege, if they so choose, to speak to persons who are like their literary elders, that sort of stuff, and share within that knowledge and so on. And for me personally, there's a certain sweet feeling to it. So you're almost like Indiana Jones. You're a scholar. You jumped on the trains somewhere along the line and you got caught up in a story arc, and then there's a reference to something that happened before. And now you're in the archives amidst cobwebs and dust trying to find out, is this the last time that Thor can break his hammer before he dies a permanent death because his soul was used to reforge the hammer at some point. Is that even still relevant? Stuff like that. And then, of course, there's the 5 to 6 issue minis that are nice, tight, compact stories like what Mark Miller has been doing for the past few years that tell short bursts of intense stories that have you enraptured for 5 issues wanting more at the end. So I think they all have a role to play.
Yeah, for me, so let me start with a current perspective, right? So Invincible, Wade mentioned, is a complete series, and I think overall it was very well executed, right? But recently, I don't know if it's because of the popularity of the animated show, the resurgence of interest in the series overall. But Kirkman has dropped a series Battle Beast, and I am generally disinterested because I know how the story of Battle Beast ends, and for me it's a lot like trying to watch a TV series that's already been canceled. You're like wondering what's the point, but that might just be me. I would be more interested in uh uh a new series out of the Invincible universe that is additive. Invincible has children, a series following one of them, or another character from the series, that kind of stuff. It feels in a way because Invincible gives me such a firm, definitive end, retreading or grown in that universe doesn't seem to be a ideal use of my time. But again, maybe that's just me. So that's like one con of having a nice a nice complete beginning, middle, end story, right? The other thing is that it feels like the big two publishers for sure are trying to use the worst elements of both approaches. So you're finding a lot of stories being what they call written for the trades. So a story is written as like a arc, let's say 6 issues, and it all feels very decompressed. Like, oh well, I have 6 issues of the story, so let me stretch it out. Then if it was more of a traditional serialized issue to issue, then it might feel like a lot tighter, if that makes sense. So right now, I feel like the big two comics, maybe a couple others, are writing for trade paperbacks. So they're trying to give people that, bingeable meal of a story. But the reading of it doesn't read well issue to issue, week to week, because of how decompressed it is. Am I making sense here, or am I rambling?
I disagree a little bit. I don't know, but
I mean, that's fine.
I don't really see the arcs, the 5 issue arcs, as complete stories. More like a day in the life of an ongoing story to me. And furthermore, as far as decompress, it's kind of the opposite, because they kind of you only got 5 issues to tell a story, or 6. So to me, they kind of rush it, going the opposite. You don't really get the development that you would get from an ongoing saga. That's something that takes 2 years to play out in 5 issues or 6 issues. It just feels rushed. Like the last few Batman arcs have felt like that. And as well, I mean, that's the standard with Mark Millar, but you expect that. There's a big Millar stories are like blockbusters. So that is a one story and done. I don't want to see that in Spider-Man where it's gonna pick up next month. Well, I'm supposed to remember what happened, but still there's something new. It just feels like you're trying to do different things and you can't, and they aren't succeeding with walking and chewing gum at the same time for me. So, yeah.
All right, you mentioned Mark Miller. Last thing I read with him was Prodigy, something on Mars.
Yeah,
Mars.
Yeah, Super Genius.
That felt even though that was like a limited series. I think like 5 issues. That still felt very decompressed.
You read the other minis from him? You read the other minis from the character? That was like the third one, I think. Second.
I think I read the one before when Miller was doing his crossover.
Oh yeah, because he was in that too as well.
But
yes,
that particular series for sure, it felt both decompressed and rushed. It really did, because, and I get that feeling with other books as well. That nothing comes to mind right now, but it's like you're reading it and you're like, you get the end of the issue and you're like, was that it? Where's your rest? But then it was like a rush to get there. And it felt like if you were to like reformat it, things would fit a lot tighter. So you might end up getting a more satisfyingly paced story across 2 or 3 issues than you're actually getting in what's published in one. But again, maybe that's just me. But I think, like Glenn, I think that there is a purpose to both approaches. I think that right now, with a lot of people's very short attention span, a lot of people's short time to spend on stuff, the allure of other more interactive or more visually dynamic forms of entertainment, I think that there's an appeal in having these short, tight, limited series. If you speak to anybody who is new to comics, who's an emerging comic fan, you will hear that there's a sense of intimidation from reading 20, 30, 50, 60 years of continuity, right? So you're going to find people that are jumping on for shorter stuff. But the flip side is that editors at like places like Marvel these days do not give two walk-ups about continuity in the first place. So telling long form storytelling in comics at Marvel doesn't seem to be making much sense.
So you don't see the value. So when you say that, you mean you want short form stories from long-term characters, or you want brand new stories altogether, like a new Invincible or a new, whatever by Miller, something new? Or you just want brand new arcs and brand like reboots, basically speaking, on established characters that you want to see a new take on Spider-Man, a new arc. Well, not necessarily a new take, but you want to see a tight 6-issue story every time, or you want the ongoing saga?
I would, if it were me, I would do it. I would go with a hybrid approach, kind of like borrow from television, where you have a short arc, so like 6, 8 issues, and you tell that story. So, not if anybody's been watching Star Trek: A Strange New Worlds. Star Trek is doing Strange New Worlds is doing self-contained individual issues, so like the mission of the week kind of format. But then there's this extended emotional and character development continuity. So you're getting a mix of both those approaches. So you can jump into Strange New Worlds, watch an episode like this week, and you get that self-contained story satisfaction.
Wait, is it back?
It's not back yet, and I'm looking forward to it coming back.
Oh.
But it's not back yet. But
So
that's
am
just
I. I mean,
saying that cool. But that's just like one example that comes to mind. So you can tell a Spider-Man story where there's this, this thing that Spider-Man is dealing with for these 5, 6, 8 issues. You can have that with a particular writer, a particular creative team, and then the next arc is again self-contained, but there's emotional continuity there for Spider-Man. What is consistent there is the emotional journey of the character. So you can read that arc, boom, and if that works for you, great. Right now is a hodgepodge of approaches, particularly at Marvel. DC right now, and I think we've talked about this before, is a lot more coherent with their all-in initiative, with one glaring exception, which we'll get to later. But yeah, so maybe that might be a better approach.
Okay, so I don't fully agree with everything that Mark said, but he did make some important points here. What we need to consider when we're talking about the length of a series is there's 3 main things. There's actually 4, but there's 3 ones that I deem to be super important. The first one is the writer, second, the audience, the third, the characters, and the last is editorial and big heads. Okay, so in terms of the writer, a writer would have a story that they would like to do, a character that they would like to work on, and so on. They themselves would know, okay, well, this story that I have planned, it fits neatly within a 5 issue, or this needs 12 issues, it needs 25, this could go on for 50, right? Then there's the character. Not every character is suitable for ongoing anything. Some characters, they don't have the ability to carry, let's say, a solo title or an ongoing. Some characters are just perfect for nice little short stories, whereas others, just by their nature, is able to go on forever and ever. Wolverine. So you have characters that can do that. And then lastly, you have well, not lastly, but third, you have the audience, you guys, myself, everybody else. There are instances where I think maybe I can say I can speak for all of us here, but there's at least one character in the entire pantheon of comic books that you love enough that you just want more of that character. That character is like your comfort food. It's your go-to. You just want stories from that character and to just be able to return to them. That character is your home, right? Those characters, we feel would deserve a long storyline or at least a series of trades, where you can tell interesting 10 issue stories or 6 issue stories with them ongoing. For example, the Sentry, right? The Sentry is not a character that I would consider worthy of having a long series. I don't think the Sentry can actually pull it off, right? And Sentry poses another problem where he's too powerful for the current batch of writers to be able to do anything with, right? They seem to be more comfortable with the more street level, more mundane characters where you can tell a lot more human interest stories with those. But super powerful characters. Excuse me?
I love how you phrase that. He's too powerful for the current batch of writers. I love that phrase.
Yeah. So, but what I do find is that if you do like a 5-issue mini with Sentry, a nice tight storyline, but being respectful to continuity, of course, because that's essential, right? You don't want to betray what you're building with your audience. It's good if you can cultivate that. So you do some 5-issue minis and you be respectful to whatever continuity you're building with that character, and he works. He works also very well as a part of a team or a side character in somebody else's story. He does that. That's works very well. And then you have characters like Daredevil or Moon Knight, as we've seen, who can hold like a 50 issue run. And then there are characters that they fight tooth and nail to make them viable for a 50 issue run in Marvel.
Carol Danvers.
I knew it.
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? She went from being an unlikable character during a very rough time for that character, and the writer persevered with that character to the point where she was eventually distanced from all that humdrum and allowed to exist as an actual character within the Marvel universe, reinventing and recrafting her continuity into something of substance, right? And Marvel chose to celebrate her longevity by canceling her book. Anyway, I'm not getting to that. But anyway, and lastly, we have the big heads and editor. Editorial, if they're doing their job, can have that perspective, that 3-point of view perspective where they can see if the writer is up to task, if the character is up to task, and if our audience is that invested. But the audience is willing to give anything a chance because the hope is that the book would be good. And if the book is good, that they can be there for a long time, not just necessarily a fun time. If the editorial is on point and on the ball where that is concerned, they can make that decision, say, hey, you know what? Let's give you 5 issues, test the waters, like how Mark was suggesting. And if you're doing good, we can expand it to another 5 issues or another 10 issues and see how it goes. But that in and of itself provides its own problems because now the writer is tasked, now has to focus on telling bite-sized stories instead of maybe the structuring the story the way the character either deserve or the story deserves, where you have like a full arc where what's his name did that Batman arc that was considered to be a very controversial one with the wedding and all of that stuff.
Yes.
Right, Tom King. He was supposed to go for like 100 issues, but he had to stop at like 80 because of Rada or whatever. But he was given that latitude to tell his story because that story needed that. Some may argue maybe he should have ended earlier. But again, that's our prerogative as fans to run our mouth from the sidelines. But yeah.
Here's the thing, right? You may like before buckets, before groupings that you outlined. I think that speaks to it quite well. But then there are variables. Variables like, say for instance, the rockstar mentality from a lot of creators. 90s was the age of rockstar illustrators, rockstar artists. Now we're seeing these rockstar writers. And that I think throws off the very neat calculation that you outlined, Glenn, because a writer is not coming in and saying, "Hey, I want to write for 100 issues." Okay, that is not the purview, the big head, the editorial. They're not the ones who are making that call. A writer is coming in and saying, "I've got a story worth 100 issues. Let me tell it." As a fan, though, and you've seen this repeatedly over the last decade at least, where you're going to have a book with this extended arc. It's an extended development for a character. It might not be 100 issues. It could be 50. It could even be 25. But then the book gets canceled way before the conclusion. And as a fan, that vexes me because, that trajectory for that character is going to end up unfulfilled. I have no idea how the story ends. So what then is the point? The flip side of that, and a recent example of this is with Storm. Storm is a popular character, easily one of the top 10 popular characters from Marvel. And Marvel has tried to give Storm a solo series. For me, personally, a popular character.
Outside of X fans, people care about Storm that kind of way. I get that she's iconic in terms of the Black superhero and whatnot, but is she really popular?
Here's the thing about Storm, right?
She can't sustain a book. So I mean, I've never found Storm interesting outside of the X-Men.
No, I fully understand what they were working with in regards to the character and had a story that lined up very well for that character.
I don't think there's anything you could do to make Storm sell, to be honest. But
have you been reading the current Storm series?
No, I heard.
Hang on. I was just getting to that. Throughout the decades, right, Storm has actually been a favorite to a lot of people. She hasn't been super, super popular, but she is pretty iconic. You can't think of the X-Men without thinking about Storm, right? And
I hear what you just said.
But hang on. Storm has been favored by a lot of comic book readers and persons who are not even in comics. But the thing is, Storm was more of like an underground character that had like a huge following, but it wasn't like a mainstream where she was given the forefront like that until recent years, when we've went through this whole thing where there's been paying a lot of attention to minorities and LGBTQ persons and the whole feminist movement and whatnot. She became a symbol because those persons who were pushing these particular agendas, they caught wind of Storm's underground popularity, and then there's this whole worship of Storm, and then her profile was instantly elevated in mass media. But to me, that happened too quickly for Storm, and it felt it was kind of forced.
Let me take a moment and explain to you Carol Danvers from manufactured popularity, a manufactured trajectory.
Storm is a replacement for Carol Danvers because Carol Danvers was a fail. You remember Marvel, the time when Storm profile started going up, right? Remember Marvel was on that push for their own Wonder Woman. They needed a strong female character that would take point in their marketing. So the first place they looked was Carol Danvers because she was essentially a blank slate and the closest to the Wonder Woman archetype that they could find. But the character was just so unlikable at the time that it was a complete flop. So what's the next best thing? Who are you going to turn to? Sue Storm? Sue Storm is the worst possible person for the story, for the narrative that they want to tell. She's a comfortably married and happy woman. No, they needed a strong, single, powerful woman. And Remember, the same time Storm rose in prominence is the same time the term Omega level also rose into prominence, to the point where if you sneeze, you hit some unknown character that suddenly had their profile propped up to Omega level. All because they needed someone to fill that particular role and bracket. Now, the question now becomes, is it worth it for Storm? Does it benefit her? And is she actually holding her own as a standalone character, as a flagship female character? Is she actually succeeding with that? Well, I don't know what the sales numbers on her books are, but the quality of her book is definitely pretty high. So maybe we'll see something come of that, but that's not our call. And Mark, you made some points just before there, right? Here's the funny thing about that. You were mentioning variables. Okay. The last few years, like within the last 5 years, if I'm being generous here, Marvel has not been making sensible moves in regard to their product and their approach to business. They just simply have not. There is no care for the characters, there's no care for continuity, and they have taken the most cash grabby, exploitative manner, sell their books and make their money, which has nothing to do with maintaining the integrity of their books. So you will see books that get started and then stop. They get the cheapest writers that they can, the cheapest artists that they can to have them work on titles, and they just keep trying to get to that number one issue. Always back to number one, with no consideration of the story, how well it is going, or if people even care about it. So I won't use that as something to determine whether or not, ongoing or minis are viable and if one is better than the other. I wouldn't bring that as a point for that particular topic that we're on. It doesn't work.
I thought after Carol, with the failure of Carol, I thought they were going to push Photon next, because it seemed like they were setting her up to be the next big, powerful, big bad woman in there. I mean, they broke off her relationship with, what's his name, with Adam Brashear, with Blue Marvel, just dry soap, and they seem to be starting her on some brand new origin story where she discovers herself again or something. So I thought that's what they were pushing, like, making her big bad. They even put her back to her old name, Photon. So I thought that's what they were doing. And then they kind of just realized they were flopping with her and grabbed Storm. That's what it felt like to me.
I think for what you guys are saying carry some water if you just look at Storm's profile in comics, but the appeal of Storm, I think, goes back to the original X-Men animated series. That is when Storm's profile really started to go up. Storm was one of the best known characters in that series, and in a lot of ways, I feel like it's fed back into the comics to kind of boost her profile more organically than, say, Carol Danvers. But again,
okay, well, let's not go into Storm conversation. No one here for me to topic. How about we tie this up with everybody says what side you fall on in terms of long-term storytelling or finite arc story, and give the listeners a couple of points and reasons to support it. Glenn, what you got to say?
I prefer like the in-between. I would like long story arcs between 25 to 50 issues. I think that the landscape in terms of just readership in general and the times that we have afforded to us, and ongoing is comfort food. Yes, I agree. And I would like to see that, but I think the best would probably be like the 25 to 50 issues. The reason being that to me is enough time or enough space for an author to really tell a nice, put together, well-constructed story with the three acts, beginning, middle, and end, and all of that jazz. It just works out better for me. And example would be Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil run. I think that was an excellent run and an excellent showing for the character.
Agreed on Zdarsky's Daredevil for sure. Yeah.
I think that I would go with a bit of a hybrid approach. So you're gonna have continuity of like the emotional beats, but shorter, more self-contained runs. I think the upper limit for me would be like the same 25 issues. because I do agree with Glenn that that will give a writer worth their salt enough room to run and develop the character. But I say that with the caveat that editors need to start doing editor stuff. You need to start taking the reins a bit, not necessarily to constrain, the story or the creativity of the creative team, but some guidance, some direction, some lines to color within. I think that would be a good thing for everybody involved.
What side do you fall on, Mike?
I am also of the hybrid theory because, like Glenn and like it's established, there are certain characters and books that I consider comfort food. I want to sit down and really dig into them and get into them. And there's certain characters to me that you can't tell in a miniseries. You can't. They has to be fleshed out and done into, and they have too much history to them and stuff. So you can't just, like do a little mini thing and expect that to work, not for certain characters. But there are times when I also want to just grab a quick short story, just get me through it, beginning, middle, end, boom. And like there are times when, I want to read a Hulk and I want to, sit down and see, okay, get into this, get into that. Give me a good, proper story, like what Alluhwi did with the Immortal Hulk. That was absolute beauty to me. Heck, I wish that was still going. And then there are times when I just want to read something quick, fast, and a punch to the gut, if you know what I mean. Like Legend of Luther Strode. That's not something you can drag on and go out and like really go into like some big 50 thing. No, a good 25 issues, a good something around there, short, super strong action, and boom, just leaves you feeling like, oh, got off a roller coaster. So there's benefits and of course downsides to both. And I think, it's one of those you gotta mix the yoga with the Tai Chi. You need both.
Michael, no. Michael, no, that's not how you're supposed to have ended. You're supposed to have ended with, in the end, it doesn't even matter. You're not going to start off your little speech here with hybrid theory and not end with a Linkin Park quote, man. Come on.
Like, both of y'all literally said hybridized.
I don't know if you caught the joke, Michael. Did you get the joke?
Of course I caught the joke.
Okay.
What, you think he's a rebel? Come on, man. Give us some credit.
No, when he started talking about something else. I don't know if he didn't get the reference Glenn was making. So,
bro, I have the entire Linkin Park discography.
Okay, excellent. For me, I can see the value of short form storytelling when it comes to new properties and stuff you get from Image and Dark Horse or Mad Cave or whatnot. But when it comes to the big two, I definitely do prefer the long term version. You get deeper character development. I mean, I've been reading, not personally, but Spider-Man has been around from the 60s. I've been reading all his adventures from then. I've seen him grow up, deal with relationship, work, responsibilities, and kind of like real time. All that development happened up until the 2000s, and then we got that reset and the dissolution of the marriage. Nonsense. But for that period of time, we saw somebody's life progress, and that's what I want to see. There was more emotional investment for me, because I knew that character and I knew every month something new was going to happen. And that same person, it wasn't a reboot of the person or a brand new version of the person, it was the same person. There's that sense of continuity and legacy. That's Peter Parker, that's Batman, that's whoever. I see their trials day by day, month by month. As things changed for me in my life, things were changing with them in their life. You also had, like, very much like a soap opera Spider-Man was. So you had that serialized tension, and you had cliffhangers month after month. That kept me invested. And Marvel, holistically, everybody was on the same timeline, so you could get crossovers. And what happened in Spider-Man mattered in Fantastic Four and vice versa. So that was what drew me to comics in the first place. I think we've lost that. I think we're poor for it. There's a place for, like I said, the short-term stuff. When you got new properties and stuff you never heard of before. And then you got Elseworlds and what if, so you can explore the things. But centrally, I think that's what we need to get back to. At least for me, that's what I prefer. So long-term storytelling, that's what I want. I'm not going to get it, but that's what I want.
I would agree with you on the fact of long-term stories, but only if the damn editorial department doing their job right and keeping writers in check and actually, reading this stuff to make sure, hey, you can't use, at least, make sure stuff is nice and tight and in something, because I don't want to read something I like that. That's not supposed to happen. That can't happen. Who greenlit this? So
Yeah, I agree. The shit always needs a guiding hand. Like Glenn, you say it a lot. There's no Stanley anymore. Even a gym shooter. Once you can get everybody in the same path, you get enough freedom to tell their story, but within certain guidelines. You're working for a company, you're not working for yourself. So you gotta keep everything flowing and connected. That is, I think that would make for um, a stronger lane altogether. I don't know if we get in that with Absolute and Ultimate. Ultimate, we seem to have 4 or 5 books that are kind of tight, all heading in one epic conclusion. We maybe have that Absolute. Those books are supposed to be set in the same universe, but none of them feel the same. Yeah, I just don't want books existing in a vacuum telling these little short arcs. It feels very much like how the Silver Age or the Golden Age was, where nothing mattered. You get a bunch of stories of Superman in one book. One Superman was a rainbow Superman. In the next, he had a super monkey. In the next, he got married to Lois Lane. And there's all these throwaway stories that never went anywhere or meant anything. So that is kind of how I feel now about the books we get now, but on a slightly wider scale because you get 5 issue books and 6 issue books. But to have that long interconnected thing that Marvel did originally in the 60s, that sole proper serialized telling thing, that is what makes comics for me, personally.
Agreed, 100%.
You need to broaden your horizons, Wade. Start reading some manga.
Why do I have to? I didn't curse you all. I curse you today. Do I have to curse you though? Do I have to?
Wade, you need to make Mark use more expensive baits on you. You check me. Don't rise to them cheap baits there, man.
Yeah, I should. Yeah. He got me. He shouldn't have. That was a lot. And the thing is, I was gonna go on a Mary Jane Watson tangent when I talk about the dissolution of the marriage. But I said no, let me not do that. Let me take the high road. As we can get
One thing about Storm that I don't know, maybe a bit controversial, and I don't know, I don't want some weird Karen coming and hunting me down. But my favorite era of her was when she was married to T'Challa. I'm sorry, when she was on her queen ship. Okay, like queen of the most powerful country, married to Black Panther, still practically running the X-Men. That was to me her highlight, her heyday.
You got a real low power fetish going on, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I realize. Yeah. OP anyway, and you're hot for it. All right, I got it.
You see, that's how you brush off thoughts, Wade. That's how you do it.
Yeah, all powerful, just be big and bad. I get you. All right, okay. All right, so those are our positions. Everybody knows where to fall. We'll see what the company's doing in the long term.
But I think that we should at least recognize and pay tribute to Peter David, who passed away. You know, that was very sad. Peter David, he wrote a lot of impactful books, iconic books. I knew him from X Factor. Others would know him from his amazing run on the Hulk and his contributions towards the Hulk mythos, the Maestro, and all of that stuff. I mean, when it came to Hulk, if it came from Peter David, Greg Pak, or Al Ewing, you knew it was going to be good shits.
Here is where I'm going to get crucified. I was really hoping that nobody would mention this passage of Peter David because I know where it can come from me. My introduction to Peter David was actually from the Star Trek novels. And Zaddy was one. And then I got into his writing from that 90s Aquaman run he did.
Okay, that's fair.
So, yeah, but I am more familiar with Peter David's work from him being a novelist.
He's also the co-creator of Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099.
Yeah.
Not again, that.
That's a shame.
I don't think that like a lot of these companies are still operating using very archaic contract terms. And like right now comics is a multi-billion-dollar entertainment juggernaut. I really feel like DC and Marvel should be compensating people better. Like retirement or something. Like there's no reason why Peter David's wife, pension. Peter David's wife has to appeal and do like GoFundMe's and that kind of stuff for medical bills. Like you said, he is one guy who has been working consistently and at I think a fairly consistent caliber of work. Because when I read up on him, I think he had some sort of medical condition where he wasn't able to physically write, and he was using speech to text to still put out work. So it's shameful, really.
Imagine having to be working all when you're on your dying bed.
It's insane.
That's grim, boss. That's grim.
And for me as a company, if I heard that, I would be so embarrassed that I would have to do something. I can let that slide. But America is a land of capitalism. So I've seen people online saying, well, he was paid for his work. His work for her. It's not like they didn't pay him. They don't owe him anything. He got salary. Really?
He got a
Come on. His work is basically the foundation of what you make your bread and butter off of now.
Come on, covering his medical bills is petty cash for Disney.
Bare minimum.
Seriously.
But this is why we're getting the quality of books that we've been getting from Marvel, because they know the creatives, the American creatives, they are wise towards the industry, and so they don't settle for the pittance that the old contracts would be giving them and so on. So they try to avoid this by going into third world countries and getting creators from there to do their work.
Question, what do you think a guy like Hickman's contract looks like?
What does it look like?
I mean, how much they pay him?
Well, Hickman has never said or spoken about what he's being paid, but he's being paid a very comfortable sum for what he's doing, comparable to what Millard used to pull.
I don't really care what they're paying Hickman because he keeps getting screwed over on some level. I am still very, very salty about the crack at the.
Nobody sells books like him, though.
Yeah,
anything.
Imagine how much better his books would sell if they let him stick the friggin' land in. Real talk.
Yeah.
That new he got a new thing coming up, Imperial. I do not give a fuck.
Boss,
because
I'm telling
somebody's gonna screw that up for him.
No, Imperial is not his idea. Imperial was for somebody else.
Isn't he the name escapes me?
The name escapes me at the moment. I'm not sure if it's for Kate's or somebody else, but it was definitely supposed to be for somebody else, and then they stepped away from it. Was it Ewing? They stepped away, and then they turned to Hickman and they asked him if he can do it, and he's like, okay, well, yeah, he has some concepts that can work, so he took it up.
I am not.
No, to show you how messed up. You heard about the Jeremy Renner situation?
You mean with him trying to wrestle a snowplow?
No, yeah. He played Hawkeye, but they're basically planning to do a season 2 for the Hawkeye show. And he was in talks with them, and they want to pay him half of what they paid him in the first season. They're not talking about a little increase. He didn't even so much as ask for an increase in nothing. He just said, hey, just pay me what you paid me the first season. They're trying to pay him half of that.
Well, I mean, I get that to some extent. I don't think the show did the numbers they were hoping it would do, and they knew that would happen again. So I guess it's saying we're reducing everything. So I don't know. Because I mean, I think what happened is, from what I read is that he was contracted to do 2 seasons, so they wanted to do the second season cheap, and there's a way of forcing him out because he would have said, "No, I'm not taking it." Man, so if you ain't taking the problem, we ain't gonna do it then. So I think that was the issue, if I recall correctly.
The man said he's not even taking a job at Marvel; he's taking a job at Disney. Okay, you tell them.
Yeah, but anyway, rest in peace, Peter David.
Yeah,
it's always sad to see this happen. It isn't the first time I've seen it happen to either. But I don't know. These guys, they need to do better. But we know big corporations don't care about the little men, even the ones that got them where they were. But I'm glad that the American creators are wising up and doing their own creative work, their own stuff, and not letting these people take advantage of them. But we as the fans suffer because we get the poor pop down third-rate work. Because but what are you gonna do? We can't do that. We don't want to kill it altogether, but I don't know.
You're the same guy that hoping that Marvel is Marvel Days.
Yeah. And dies a painful death so that people could refocus back on, say, we got these properties that we have that can do better. Let's put some talent behind them and actually pay them, and all this thing. The only way to make money is from movies, and let it grow. Start pulling some dollars.
You actually believe that if the MCU dies, that Marvel Comics ain't gonna die soon after?
I think
really?
I think comics on the way out. I said that before, but I think that
I think
a
you're wrong. But
refocus.
continue.
I think a repivoting and a refocus on what made comics good in the old days would bring back a lot of the core fans that have stepped away. And that could possibly sustain it for a little longer. But as it is, people leaving in droves. It's a shrinking market. People like us,
Aren't dying for
you keep saying that, but as we
because
get
that's the
older,
truth.
as the late 30s and early 40s and mid 40s and early 50s, people pass on. The new generation aren't taking up comics.
What do you think manga is? Manhwa, man.
You know what I mean when I say comics. You know what I mean. Manga.
For our listening audience, educate them. What do you mean?
I don't read manga. I don't have any respect for manga. And when I say comics, I mean Western style comics. When I
You
call
mean
my not necessarily European comics are fine, just in the manga, anime, Asian style, whatever. I call them something different. Tintin is a comic. Tintin is not American. But when I say comics are dying, you know what I mean. I mean American comics.
I don't know what it is that manga did to Wade that made him just block off completely because
inappropriately?
if you listen to Wade long enough, you understand that Wade is very passionate about comics. And he has a wealth of knowledge and understanding of the industry, and not just the industry, but also of the technical aspects that make up a book. He's fully aware of it, which makes it very surprising to me why he has such a negative approach towards, and a blanket approach, negative approach towards manga. And from the casual person, I would expect that because they can't see or have the latitude to differentiate between the different genres and stuff, the particulars of manga. Manga is no different from any other written medium. You have the trash and you have the excellent stuff. And somewhere in the middle, everything gets lumped together. Now, there's manga work that is comparable to the best of Western comics. You check me, you may not like the art style, but the quality of the writing is comparable. That's top-notch stuff. And there are persons who the shonen side of manga drowns out everything else because it's very loud, very noisy, very flashy, and of very little substance. It's made for preteen boys who love a lot of action and fighting. That's what it literally means boy. Shonen means boy, right? It's not for grown men. That's why we have seinen. That's for grown men. You check me, that's where you get stuff like Berserk and so Vagabond, those types of stuff. That's where you get that. But anyway, this is not about that. But what I would say is this though. Comics is not dying. Comics is being actively murdered by its caretakers. The people and them that are in the greater part of the market, who are the ones that are responsible, who are the main load bearers of that particular industry, are murdering the thing that makes them money, right? But everybody else is finding a way to survive in this weird space. And just like with novels and so on, as somebody who's been working in the book industry for well over a decade, the prominence of books and likewise comic books may not ever really go back to the heights that it used to be, but it's definitely not going to disappear completely. Whatever form and structure it takes, that is left to be seen, but there's no absolute death knell for comics. I don't believe that.
Let me just say, my hate for manga stems from a belief that we've lost a lot of potential comic fans to manga. I am offended by the rise of manga and the decline of Western comics, and I think the two are intertwined. So I can't get past the bitterness of that, and I will not entertain manga knowing that comics are suffering, and I'm spending time doing that. I feel personally hard done by manga fans. I hear people online saying, "Well, comics are shit. It's so much better. And manga has this and manga has that." I can't. So I'm not doubting that there may be manga that I would enjoy, but to get me any frame of mind to do it, I can't. And then, like I said, to wade through, as Glenn said, it's trash. To wade, there's so much of it. To wade through that stuff. Nah, I don't know. I don't have any connection to it
Come
like I
on,
have.
sir.
the comics when I was young. I've now got build connections to manga. I'm just not interested in doing it.
So
That's
so
a
much
fair.
unpack
That's
here. So much unpack
one
here.
moment. One moment.
Hey, go ahead,
Mark.
go ahead.
You make a very fair point in that, trying to get into manga. Well, the way in which you came across manga, I can completely understand your perspective on that because that's not a unique story. I've heard this time and time again. But the funny thing about it is that everything shonen manga is doing to be successful is things that they copy from what Western superhero comics had been doing back in the 80s and the 90s.
Yep.
That's all they've been doing. They keep the formula very simple. The quality of writing varies. The nuances within the writing varies. There's some shonen that are very, nuanced, right? Have very good plot development, pacing, everything. They have everything. And then there are those that are just, again, noisy and bright, right? With just they're cookies, just candy. That's what they are. But they do a very simple thing. You watch Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z formula is very simple. AI don't even need to work hard to replicate a Dragon Ball Z storyline because there is no storyline, right? It's just a matter of handling power creep.
You still need to turn on the power.
Now you trolled me.
Yeah.
How you view manga in general is how I view Dragon Ball Z. It is mindless candy. And to me, it is something that appeals to the lowest common denominator. I once told somebody that the secret to understanding the success of Dragon Ball Z is to understand the effects of testosterone. If you figure out testosterone, you figure out Dragon Ball Z. It's not hard. And Solo Leveling come and do the same thing. And Solo Leveling is a manhwa, which is trash. Manhwa is trash. It's the bottom. You have manga, and then you have manhwa, and then you have Chinese manhwa at the very bottom. Absolute trash, right? And I would never go recommending this stuff like to any meaningful reader. There's a few that I would pick, like that did what they're supposed to very well, and the writing is very good. But those are like one in a million, literally. I feel this should be an episode by itself.
No, I was gonna say that what Gibson can do is split this in two, put this in one, release and thing, yeah. But
Listen,
sir,
15.
yeah, anything so. But sir, do you read manga?
I don't have access. No, I'm serious.
Okay, look, I keep saying, to me, manga should be animated. These stories, well, these shonen stuff, it lends itself to motion. It looks better on screen. The power ups, you fight and everything on a black and white static page. It's like, what's the point?
Here's the interesting thing, right, Wade? A very interesting thing. There's a straight through line in terms of adaptation over in the East. Most of these stories start off as light novels. Okay, the light novels.
What's a light novel is? I keep hearing that term.
Okay, a light novel is like a novella, so to speak, but it's released like you'd have a series, book 1, book 2, book 3, right? So they have novellas going from book 1 all the way up. They're just a few chapters. They call them light novels because they're literally light novels.
It's not prose, right? It's actually
no, it's not prose. Not prose. It's a novel, but like about a third the size of a normal Western novel, and they're numbered going all the way up, and it goes on until the writer is just tired of writing, and then that's it. Now, if the light novel is good enough, then it would get a manga adaptation where it gets converted into a comic. Not all manga starts this way, but quite a lot do. Some mangas start off as mangas. If they perform well enough as a manga, then they get an anime adaptation. And if the anime does very well, then they get a live action adaptation. So that's the through line. One Piece, Yu Yu Hakusho, those are the top in their field. Because as you've seen, they reach all the way to the point of a live action adaptation. And they've been running consistently from since the 90s, non-stop, unbroken. But that's a rare case, though, to have that sort of longevity. Because most manga would come to an end one of 3 ways. They did poorly and were cancelled. They've reached the natural end of their story and the writer concludes it. like what happened with My Hero Academia, or the writer dies because the condition by which he has to work is so horrendous that his body finally gave up, like Peter David, and he dies, which is super common.
Yeah, so like you already have there's already a beachhead in your consciousness for manga, anime. So like your abject hatred is so weird to me. You like Berserk, you like Demon Slayer, you like My Hero Academia, and I'm sure that there are other anime that you would sneak and watch.
Yeah, Baki, Kengan, Ashura. But like I
Like,
said, don't you see the difference?
Yeah, most of that is seinen. They are made for grown men.
yeah. So
But I like to see it on screen. Is on
but no,
screen.
you're treating the medium of manga as a monolith and hating everything equally, which I mean applause for that. But still, but then you're gonna gravitate and be so enjoying the adaptation of the exact same work. And for me, and Glenn can tell me if I'm wrong, but the adaptations of manga from page to screen are a lot more consistent than we get here in the US.
But here's the thing, Mark. Here's the thing, and this is where I also kind of feel a way how Wade feels as well. We never got what anime got
Exactly.
in regards to the closest we got to that was the DC animated universe. That's the closest. But that was just DC. But in terms of comics in general, we never got like a whole industry around animating the comics that we had consistently. Anime had some handful of passionate people. Think about three or four guys, and they pitched to a network and they got Toonami, right? Which is a block of prime television. And within that time frame, they played whatever anime they could get their hands on, right? Whatever they got the license for, which turned out to be Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Gundam, and eventually Naruto and
Inuyasha.
Bleach,
Cowboy Bebop.
Inuyasha, Cowboy Bebop, and the likes. So whatever they got their hands on, they did that. And it happened at the right time, which was a turn in the millennium. And we had a brand new generation that was just becoming aware. Their culture was just forming. Anime was right there. So just like how we, back in our days in the 80s as kids, when we would have our own set of TV shows watching, growing up on, that was happening for them, but it was Toonami on Cartoon Network. So they not only did they grow up with Powerpuff Girls, Dexter's Lab, Samurai Jack. Later on in the day, they had Dragon Ball Z and so on. So it was a nice afternoon block. So an entire generation that is being introduced to the internet is also being introduced to anime consistently. And Marvel and DC were not positioned to take advantage of that either. So Marvel and DC allowed a generation to grow up without their influence, but they kind of got it back a little bit with the MCU because they were able to capture a new generation with the MCU. Because when you look at it, there's a whole generation of grown ass adults that only know our
MCU.
heroes through the MCU.
Yep.
And they fumbled the bag because they had an opportunity to tie two ecosystems together to make them work in symbiosis, and they did not.
Correct. Agreed.
So that's their problem. That's not manga problem. That's not anime problem. But I do get what Wade is feeling because I feel that too, because that was a major loss that didn't needed to be a loss.
Yeah, but hating on manga because comics, like you mentioned, Glenn, the gatekeepers are killing their golden goose. That isn't manga's fault. That's comics' fault.
It isn't, but my thing is, what I'm saying here is that I'm not giving manga attention that I'm gonna give to comics. Manga has enough fans and has enough eyes on it. They're not my attention is focused on who needs the help, which is comics. And in terms like Glenn was saying, I would watch anime because there's no comic alternative. We don't have the adaptations, we don't have the cartoons, we don't have the shows. We don't, so might as well watch the anime. That's just how I feel about it.
Boy, I use anime to push Western comics. I to a degree, yes. So it's a nice song and dance that you kind of have to figure out. So what I do is we have manga conversations, we have anime conversations. I live in both worlds, so I can code switch back and forth very easily. It's not a problem. So we have those conversations. And I mean, being around you guys, I read a lot, but your varying tastes and experiences have also widened my perspective on comics, the writers, and so my reading has expanded. My range of reading in comics have expanded by virtue of outsiders. So now I am better able to find comparisons between Western comics and the manga where they intersect in terms of tastes. Like Luther Strode is one of my favorite recommendations for anybody that's into like action manga. They're like high intensity, seemingly nonsensical, visually appealing manga. Mango read Luther Strode. And it's easy because there's only 5 issues in the first one. They read the first 5, they get hooked, they go find the other 10 and they read it off. And then they're like, is there anything else like that? And then I can point to other things. With the MCU, there's a young man, one of those that I mentored. He wanted to get into comic books. He particularly liked what he was seeing with X-Men. I gave him Grant Morrison's new X-Men to read. That was it. The boy was hooked, right? And then we had that sort of mentor-mentee relationship, which I kind of hinted at earlier on in the show, where you have newcomers that are able to speak to elders within that space that is able to guide them. And to me, that's the beauty of comics and the massive continuity. Yes, manga is straightforward where you don't need anybody to help you or show you anything. You can just find volume 1 and work your way through. But the beauty of Western comics is that it creates an opportunity for bonding that is different from every other within print medium. It's different. And so I was able to tell him, hey, you know what, if you like this, read that, read this, read that. And he was right on board with me when we got into Hickman's Krokor era when it was starting. He could appreciate that because he went through New X-Men, he went through Utopia, basically all the modern X-Men, the early 2000s moving forward. He read those and he was reading alongside with me. So there's that. There are others that got into like other aspects. There's one dude, he got into Spawn of all things, right? I showed him a few things. He found Spawn appealing. He went and did his own research online, watched some videos, and then next thing I know, this dude is 200 issues deep into Spawn. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Why Spawn? He's like, the Cape, Glenn, the Cape. Right. That's all it was for him. So there are ways in which we can bridge the gap, but it takes effort, and I think it could be made more seamless and easier on the part of Marvel and DC if they want to, because the indies are making it easier to get into their books. If you look at what's going on in Image, for example, especially the Energon universe is a perfect example for that. Ghost Machine is another very good example of that. You build a small little universe. You start off with a primer. Again, something that the big two do consistently when they're doing their events. They start with a primer and then they branch off into a million books. But they don't do that. They branch off into like 3 books, 2 books, and then they just build incrementally and you find your space within that ecosystem and you're good to go. You're hooked.
We need more you, Glenn. I think your experience with your mentee, it reminds me of how I got into comics, where there was somebody with that depth of experience who said, "Oh, you like Superman? Well, then read this." I think that is what we need more of, particularly for Western comics. We need people who will be able to bridge that gap, who have the passion, who have the knowledge and the experience. I don't think it serves comics generally to be like, oh, we don't to be like exclusionary. Like for me, when I grew up, when I got into comics, it was because there was somebody who was able to say, hey, check this out. And I think we need more people saying, hey, check this out.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
That's true. I agree.
Interestingly enough, last point. Interestingly enough, there's an anime that I was watching called Black Blood Blockade, if I remember it
Black Blood.
correctly. Yeah. It was interesting because there was some sort of interdimensional invasion somewhere in the United States, I think it was, and it created a zone that was kind of weird, where you had a mix of interdimensional beings living right alongside humans, and neither faction could return to their space. So it warped the landscape, and they just had to make a living within that space. But that's not the point that I'm getting at. There's a creature in it that loves hamburgers and loves Western comics, called the name John Byrne.
Oh, for real?
That's his favorite writer. Yeah. So I just found that to be rather interesting.
That's cool. That's cool. All right. Well, it's time we wrap up. Gibson, you want to take us out as usual? Some housekeeping?
Sure. For those of you who are listening, this is episode 5 of the Four Outsiders Comics podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Again, if you do like what you're hearing and you want to support this podcast, one simple way to do that is to head over to shop.alluhwicomics.com and check out the selection of original indie comics there from creators who are from small places. Bridgeland Volume 1 is one of those, but there are definitely more like we've covered on this podcast to date. So very affordably priced. You can get them in digital as well as in print, and check those out there. You can also follow us on Spotify. We've got new episodes dropping every week on Spotify as well as on YouTube. On YouTube, that would be at Alluhwi Comics, which is the same for Instagram. You can give us a like and follow there. And for this episode, I am Mark.
Glenn.
And I'm Wade.
And this has been the Four Outsiders Comics podcast.
I think for one of these shows, we just let y'all talk about Storm for the whole 90 minutes or so. Y'all seem to really want to do. No, I mean, you get Storm. That's fine.
I hope I'm not detecting any salt here.
That's salt. I just don't get the. I just don't.
The salt
don't get
content is rising.
I just don't get it. And she lowered her value in my eyes. And understand, I'm not slut shaming. This has nothing to do with Storm. It has to do with her TSA men. When I saw that she had something going on with Wolverine, as much as I love Logan, Storm is too good for him, man. That was nasty. Taking jeans, secondhand, sloppy hand.
That was disgusting. We're gonna need an episode.
Wait, you know what's disgusting? Watching a grown man take off his briefs and put them over his face.
What is that?
No, what's disgusting is watching a grown man take off his briefs in public,
Lord, you getting that?
yes, while he plummets through the atmosphere, talking about, they're breathing. Okay, what is he huffing? That's nasty.
I don't even. I'm not even sure.
Deadpool? Who did that?
I'm not even sure what he's talking about. To be honest,
That is Batman. That
was the first thing where he. Yeah.
That was Richard taking a regular dude whose power is solely money.
That was
right,
ridiculous.
and having him doing God tier. The man jumped off the raiding Justice League satellite and survives re-entry into orbit and lands on the ground. This man on a parachute, he ain't on a spacesuit, he ain't on an oxygen tank, nothing, and he survived that mess. Nah,
Batman's feats, right? It's the more hilarious they get.
But the thing is, Glenn, like Michael said, I think I can't remember exact details, but at this point he was wearing the trunks. I think he took the trunks off and he made the trunks into a parachute. That was what it was. I can't even remember.
He took his underwear off and turned it into a face mask to survive re-entry.
Man is a cartoon.
He had to calculate the angle of re-entry so he wouldn't burn up or something like that, right? That was it. Some
mountain.
Yeah, it was Alaska or something like that.
Was this Tom King's writing?
No, this was Darsky. This was the storyline where the robot that Batman built feels safe and rogue. So the man got tossed on the satellite. He tore off the underwear, wrapped it around his face so he could, I guess, save a little bit of air or something. I don't know. Then he calculated the right angle to re-enter Earth's atmosphere without burning up and landed with no parachute from space.
Okay, he did it to protect his face from the heat of re-entry.
Listen, man, I heard I listened to an interview of Zdarsky before he came on the Batman book. He had just got the proposal, he accepted it, and there's a part in there where they ask him something concerning like how long would he write Batman for? How long of a story does he have? And the man's response is, I will write Batman for as long as they want me to write Batman.
The thing is, right? The thing is, as utterly ridiculous as it was, I loved it. There's a place, and so if you're gonna write Batman in a superhero universe, then you need to write him ridiculously. He's not gonna work other ways because he can't measure up to these other people. No, my preference of Batman is in this niche noir world where he just plays gangsters and maybe Killer Croc, and he's very dependent on his skills and his gadgets. But if you can put Batman out there with Superman and Wonder Woman and killer EA robots and all that, he needs to be ridiculous. I need to see jumping from space on somebody. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense to me.
You are mad. You are unhinged. You are.
I've explained to you my positions.
I don't think any moment will ever hit me harder when it comes to Batman than when the Death Shrouds, emissaries of the underworld, was talking about him like this one. This man pisses us off because every time he's supposed to dead, he just keeps surviving and we vex. And Batman looked the something in the eye and said, boo, and the damn Death Shroud back up.
We need a Batman therapy session.
Yeah, we can do a Storm and then we can do a Batman.
Batman intervention. That's what it should be. Not therapy, intervention.